you ever been erased while still sitting in the room? Not fired, not defeated, just quietly removed. This is the story of a man who lost everything in one meeting, but walked out with something far more dangerous: a plan. The Shah Group headquarters stood like a monument of power-glass walls, steel edges, and a legacy built over decades. Inside, on the top floor, a meeting was about to begin. But this wasn't just any meeting. This was a takeover, and the man who built half the empire didn't even know he was the target. Arman Shah adjusted his cufflinks as he entered the boardroom. His presence was calm, controlled, powerful. The kind of man who didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. But something felt off. No one greeted him. No one stood up. No one even looked him in the eyes. Instead, they avoided him, like he was already gone. Arman slowly took his seat at the far end of the table. Not at the head. Not in the center. At the end. That was the first signal. Something had changed. Around him sat the board members, men he had trusted for years. Men who had once called him sir. Men who had built fortunes under his leadership. And now, they couldn't even meet his gaze. At the center of the table sat Arman Shah, his younger brother. Sharp suit, confident posture, a slight smile that didn't belong in a family meeting. That was the second signal. This wasn't business. This was personal. "Let's begin," Zion said smoothly, tapping the table. No introduction, no discussion, just control. Arman leaned back slightly, watching him. "You seem in a hurry," Arman said. His voice, calm but heavy. Zayan smiled. "Efficiency is important." There it was, cold, calculated, distant. Eyes moved around the room. Every face told the same story. They already knew, and he didn't. "Proceed with the agenda," Zion continued. A file was placed in front of each board. Member. Not in front of Arman, not even a copy. That was the third signal. He wasn't part of this anymore. He was the subject of it. One of the senior directors cleared his throat. "We are here to vote on restructuring executive authority within Shah Group." Arman's eyes narrowed slightly. "Restructuring," he repeated. Zayan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence said everything. "Let's proceed with the vote," Zion said. No explanation, no debate, just decision. One by one, hands began to rise. Slowly, hesitantly, but they rose. Arman watched, each hand, each face, each betrayal. Some looked guilty, some looked afraid, some didn't care, and some avoided looking at him entirely. And then, the final hand went up, Zayan. Single quotes, as the room went silent, heavy, suffocating, like the air itself knew. Something irreversible had just happened. The director spoke again, voice shaking slightly by majority decision. "Arman Shah is removed from all executive authority, effective immediately." No applause, no reaction, just silence. Arman didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react. For a moment, it looked like he hadn't even heard it. But inside, everything had shifted. Not broken, not shattered, just recalculated. Finally, he stood up, slowly, deliberately. Every eye followed him now, not out of respect, but curiosity. What will he do? What will he say? Will he explode? But Arman didn't do any of that. He adjusted his jacket, looked at each person in the room, and then he smiled. Not a happy smile, not a fake smile, a dangerous smile. "Congratulations," he said calmly. The room froze. "You didn't just take the company." He paused. His eyes landed on Zion. "You buried the truth with it." Zion leaned back in his chair, unfazed. "No, brother," he replied. "We improved it, brother." The word felt heavier than the decision itself, because this wasn't just a business move. This was betrayal, blood, family, destroyed. For power. Arman nodded slowly, as if accepting something, not the loss, but the reality. Then he turned toward the door. No shouting, no argument, no defense, just silence. And that silence, it made everyone uncomfortable, because people expect anger. They understand rage, but calm. Calm is unpredictable. Calm is dangerous. As Arman walked toward the exit, his footsteps echoed. Across the room, each step felt louder than the last. Each step felt final. But just before he reached the door, he stopped. Without turning around, he spoke. "You made one mistake." The room held its breath. Zion frowned slightly. "What mistake?" he asked. Arman slowly turned his head, just enough for his voice to carry clearly. "You think removing me from this room," a pause, "means removing me from the game." Silence, heavy, uncomfortable. Then he opened the door and walked out inside the room. No one spoke, no one moved, because deep down they all felt it. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. Outside, the hallway felt colder, quieter, different. Arman walked toward the elevator, his reflection following him in the glass walls. But that reflection, it wasn't the same man who had walked into that meeting. This one was sharper, colder, focused. The elevator doors opened. He stepped inside, alone, as the doors slowly closed. His reflection stared back at him, and for the first time, there was no emotion, no hesitation, no doubt, just one thing: resolve. As the elevator descended, Arman whispered under his breath, "They took my position." A pause. "They took my name." Another pause. "They took my family." His jaw tightened slightly. "But they forgot one thing." His eyes lifted, cold, unbreakable. "I built this empire for breath, and I know exactly how to take it back." The doors opened, and just like that, Arman Shah disappeared from the building, from the company, from their world. But what they didn't know was that some men don't come back loudly. They come back strategically. And somewhere far from that boardroom, a new game had already begun, a silent one, a dangerous one, a game where no one would see the moves until it was too late, because the man they just removed wasn't defeated, he was activated. What if I told you the most dangerous man in the room is the one no one knows exists? Not the loudest, not the richest, not even the one in power, but the one watching from the shadows, waiting, calculating, and slowly taking everything back. 3 years. That's how long it took for Arman Shah to disappear. Not just from the company, but from the world. No interviews, no public appearances, no social media, nothing. It was like he had never existed. And that's exactly what they wanted. Back at Ache Group headquarters, everything looked perfect. Profits were rising. New deals were being announced. Zion Shah was now the face of the empire. Confident, powerful, untouchable, at least. That's what everyone believed. Because behind the numbers, something strange was happening. Small shares of the company were being bought. Not in bulk, not loudly, but quietly, piece by piece, through different firms, different countries, different identities. At first, no one noticed. Then, someone did, sir. There's something unusual in the stock movement. Zion looked up from his desk, annoyed. What is it now? His financial analyst hesitated. Minor acquisitions, but consistent. Zion leaned back. How minor? Less than 1% per transaction. Zion smirked. Then why are you wasting my time? The analyst swallowed. Because it's all connected. Silence. That got his attention. What do you mean, connected? The analyst stepped forward, placing a file on the table. 12 different companies, different regions, different ownership structures. A pause. But they all trace back to one controlling authorization. Zion's expression shifted, slightly, barely noticeable. But real who, he asked. The analyst shook his head. We don't know yet. That was the first crack, small but dangerous. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, in a quiet office, overlooking the Dubai skyline, a man sat in darkness. Only the city lights illuminated his face. Arman Shah. But this wasn't the same man who walked out of that boardroom. This version was rebuilt, sharpened, refined. A file slid across the desk. Another acquisition complete, his advisor said. Arman didn't look up. Percentage. Now, at 38% total control. Across all channels. Arman finally lifted his eyes. .com, focused. Double quotes, not enough. The advisor frowned slightly. At this pace, we risk exposure. Arman leaned back in his chair. Exposure is only dangerous. He paused. If you're not ready. The advisor hesitated. Are you ready? Arman looked out at the city. Lights stretching endlessly. Power everywhere, but control that belonged to very few. I've been ready for 3 years. Back in the Shah Group headquarters, the tension was growing. Zaya walked into the boardroom, irritation visible in every step. This again, he snapped. Another emergency meeting. Another discussion about the same issue. One of the directors spoke carefully. The acquisitions haven't stopped. Another added, in fact, they've increased. Zion slammed the table, then stopped them. Silence. Because no one could, sir. The analyst spoke again. We tried tracing the funds, and they're layered, clean, untraceable. Zion's jaw tightened. This is not possible. But it was. And deep down, he knew it. Meanwhile, in Dubai, Arman stood by the window, holding something in his hand, a small photo. His daughter, the only piece of his life. It hadn't been taken from him, sir. His advisor said quietly. Why now? Arman didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the photo, a soft shift in his expression. Not weakness, but purpose. They took everything from me. He said finally, my name, my company, my family. A pause. But they made one mistake. He placed the photo down gently. They left me time. Back in the boardroom. Fear had started to replace confidence. Because when you can't see your enemy, you can't predict them, sir. The analyst spoke again. There's something else. Zion closed his eyes briefly. What now? The acquisition pattern. A pause. It's not random. Zion looked up. Explain. It's strategic. Another pause. Whoever this is, isn't just buying shares. He swallowed. They're positioning for control. Silence. Heavy. Real. Zayan. Stood up slowly. No, but denial doesn't stop reality. This company is mine, he said firmly. I built this. But even as he said it, something felt wrong. Because deep down, he knew the truth. He didn't build it. He took it. And somewhere, someone was taking it back. Late that night, Zion sat alone in his office. The city lights reflecting on the glass. But this time, they didn't look powerful. They looked uncertain. He opened a file, the acquisition report, page after page. Numbers, companies, transactions, all different. All connected. And then something caught his eye. Signature authorization code. Repeated, hidden. But there. His breathing slowed. No, he whispered. Because for a moment, just a moment, he remembered something. A style, a pattern, a way of thinking. Not random, not emotional, strategic, precise, silent. His eyes widened slightly. Arman. But then he shook his head. No, that's impossible. Because in his mind, Arman was gone, finished, erased. But what he didn't understand was this: you can remove a man from power, but you can't remove what he built inside himself. Back in Dubai, Arman sat at his desk, finalizing another deal. Total projected control, he asked. Within months, majority, the advisor replied. Arman nodded slowly. Good. He stood up, walked toward the window, looked down at the city again. This time, he said quietly, I don't walk into the room as a guest. A pause. I walk in as the owner. The camera pulls back. The city glows. The game continues. Because the man they erased is now everywhere. They can't see. What happens when the ghost finally walks into the room? Not as a memory, not as a rumor, but as the man who owns everything. Midnight. Shah Group headquarters. The building was still lit, but something felt different. Not powerful, not stable, but tense. Like a storm was already inside, waiting to break. Call everyone, now. Voice cut through the silence like a blade. No hesitation, no patience. An emergency board meeting had been called at midnight. And when powerful men meet at midnight, it's never good news. Within minutes, the boardroom began to fill. Executives rushed in, half prepared, half confused. Some still adjusting their ties, some whispering, some already. Because the rumors had spread, and tonight they were about to find out if those rumors were true. Zion stood at the head of the table, pacing, restless, angry. "Explain it again," he demanded. The analyst swallowed hard. "Sir, the acquisition has crossed 49%. Silence. Dead silence. Zayan. Stopped walking, slowly turned. "What did you say?" 49%, sir." A pause. Long. Heavy. "That's not possible," but it was. And everyone in that room knew it. "Who is it?" Zion snapped. No more guesses. No more theories. His voice rose. "I want a name." The analyst hesitated. His hands were shaking slightly, because what he was about to say could change everything. "We traced the final authorization pattern." A pause, and it links all transactions to a single controlling entity. Zion stepped closer. "Then say it." The analyst opened the file, looked down, then back up. "We couldn't confirm the identity." A breath. "Until tonight." The room leaned in, every eye locked. Every heartbeat louder, and Zion demanded, before the analyst could speak. The door opened. Slowly, the sound echoed, deep, heavy, unavoidable. Every head turned. Footsteps. Calm, measured. Unhurried. And then he walked in. Arman Shah. No announcement, no permission, no hesitation. Just presence. The room froze, literally froze, like time itself had stopped. Some faces went pale, some leaned back, some couldn't even blink. Because the man standing in front of them was supposed to be gone. Zayan. Didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe. "You wanted a name?" Arman's voice was calm. Cold, controlled. And just like that, the silence shattered. "You." Zion finally spoke, but it didn't sound like power anymore. It sounded like disbelief. Arman walked forward, slowly, each step echoing across the room, each step heavier than the last. "You've been looking for the investor," he continued. A slight tilt of his head. "So here I am." The room erupted into whispers. "How is this possible? He's been gone for years. Where did he come from?" But Arman didn't look at them. His eyes were locked on one person. "Zion, you." Zion stepped forward, anger rising. "This is illegal." Arman stopped, just a few steps away. "No," he said quietly. "This is preparation." Then he placed a file on the table. The sound was soft, but it hit like thunder. "Open it." No one moved until one director slowly reached forward, opened the file. His face changed instantly. "What is it?" someone asked. The director looked up, voice shaking. 51%. A pause. Controlling stake. The room exploded. "That's impossible. This is fraud. This can't be real." But the documents were real. Every signature, every transfer, every detail. Perfect. Zion grabbed the file. Flipped through the pages faster. Harder. Dispedity. No. Because now he understood. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't luck. This was planned for 3 years. "You." Zion looked up, fury in his eyes. "You've been doing this behind our backs." Arman tilted his head slightly. "Behind your backs." A small pause. "You removed me from the front. Another step closer, so I learned to move where you couldn't see." Silence again. Heavy. Crushing. Zayan. Slammed the file shut. "This doesn't change anything." He pointed around the room. "I'm still in control here." Arman smiled. That same dangerous smile from years ago. "No," he said softly. Then louder, "You're not." He turned to the board. "As of this moment," a pause, "I am the majority owner of Shah Group." Every word landed like a hammer. "And this meeting," he glanced around the room, "it's no longer yours to control." Zion stepped forward, furious. "You think you can just walk in here and take everything back?" Arman didn't flinch. "I didn't walk in to take it back." A pause. "I already did." The room went silent again, because this time there was no argument left, only truth. Zion's voice, low. "Dangerous, this isn't over." Arman nodded slowly. "You're right." Then he leaned in, slightly close enough for only Zion to hear. "This is just the part where you realize you've already lost." Zion's expression changed, for the first time. Fear. Real fear. Because power doesn't disappear loudly. It shifts, and tonight had shifted completely. Arman straightened, turned toward the board. "Effective immediately," he said. Calmly, "There will be changes." No one argued, no one interrupted, because now they knew exactly who they were dealing with, not the man they removed 3 years ago, but the man he became after, stronger, smarter, untouchable as. Arman walked toward the head of the table, the same seat he once lost. Everyone moved aside. Not out of respect, but because they had no choice. He placed his hand on the chair, paused for a moment, then sat down, and just like that, the empire had its original king back. Because the man they erased didn't return for revenge, he returned for control. What if the biggest betrayal in your life was never about business? What if it wasn't the boardroom, the shares, or the power? What if it was something much deeper, something buried, hidden, waiting for the right moment to destroy everything you thought was true? The gates creaked open slowly. For years, no one had touched them. No one had dared to come back, because this place was more than just land. It was history. The Shah family estate stood in silence, once filled with life, now covered in dust, shadows, and memories no one wanted to face. Arman stepped out of the car. He didn't speak, didn't move immediately. He just looked. The same walls, the same windows, the same place. Where everything began and everything ended, sir. His assistant said softly, "Are you sure about this?" Arman didn't answer. Because some places don't need words. They demand courage. Finally, he stepped forward. Each step felt heavier than the last. Not because of fear, but because of memory. Flashbacks hit him without warning. A younger version of himself, walking through these halls. His father's voice, echoing, laughter, arguments, moments that once felt permanent, now reduced to echoes. The main doors opened with a deep, hollow sound. Inside, darkness, dust particles floating in thin rays of sunlight. Silence, so loud it almost felt alive. Arman walked in slowly, his footsteps echoing through the empty hall. "This place hasn't been touched in years," the assistant whispered. Arman ran his hand along the wall. Dust covered his fingers. Instantly. "They didn't abandon it," he said. "Quietly, they hid it." The assistant frowned. Why would anyone hide something like this? Arman didn't answer. Because deep down, he already knew. They moved further inside. Room by room, each one holding pieces of a past that had been erased, until they reached it. The study, the one place no one ever entered without permission. His father's private room. The door was locked. Arman stared at it. "For a long moment, this room," he said, slowly, "holds everything." The assistant stepped forward. "We can break it open." Arman shook his no. He reached into his pocket, pulled out an old key, the original key, the one his father had given him years ago. "You keep this safe," his father had said, "at the right time. You'll understand why." Arman inserted the key. Click. The door opened. Inside, time had stopped. The room was untouched, perfectly preserved, like someone had frozen it. Books aligned, desk clean, files stacked neatly, but something felt wrong. Too perfect, too controlled. Search everything, Arman said. They began going through the room. Drawers, shelves, hidden compartments. At first, nothing. Just normal documents, business files, old contracts. Then, sir, the assistant's voice changed. Arman turned. What is it? There's a hidden panel behind the bookshelf, barely visible, almost impossible to notice. Arman stepped closer, ran his hand across it. A small latch clicked. The panel opened. Inside, a compartment, filled with files, old, sealed, forgotten, or maybe hidden. Arman picked one up. His name was on it. His hands tightened slightly. Open it, he said. The assistant carefully broke the seal. Inside, documents, legal, papers, signatures, Arman. Flipped through them, faster then, slower. Then he stopped. His breathing changed. No, because what he was reading didn't make sense. This isn't right. The assistant looked confused. What is it? Arman didn't answer immediately, because his mind was racing, connecting pieces, breaking illusions. This changes everything. Another file, then another, and then the final document. A will, but not the one they knew. This was different. Older, original. Arman opened it, slowly. His eyes scanned the page, and then they froze. Because the truth was right there. Clear, undeniable. The rightful successor of the Shah estate was not Zayan. It was Arman. Silence. Heavy, unreal. This was hidden, the assistant whispered. Arman nodded slowly. Not hidden. A pause. Replaced. Everything suddenly made sense. The meeting, the vote, the removal. It was never about performance. It was planned, engineered, manipulated. Zion, Arman whispered, not in anger, in realization, because this wasn't just betrayal, this was theft. From the very beginning, he forged it, the assistant said quietly. Arman closed his eyes. Briefly, years of confusion, pain, questions, all answered in one moment. My father never chose him. His voice broke slightly. He chose me. And for the first time, this wasn't about business anymore. This was personal, deeply personal. Arman sat down slowly, holding the document. Everything he lost was never supposed to be lost. Everything taken from him was stolen, and the man who did it was his own brother. Silence filled the room again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was heavy with truth. What will you do now? The assistant asked. Arman looked up, and in his eyes, something had changed. Not just control, not just strategy, but purpose. This ends now. Not loud, not dramatic, just certain. He stood up, holding the documents tightly. Prepare everything. For what? The assistant asked. Arman turned toward the door, for the truth. A pause. And this time, his voice dropped cold, unshakable. We don't do it in the shadows. The camera slowly pulls back. The hidden room, the open files. The truth finally revealed. Because the biggest secret wasn't the takeover. It was the lie that started everything.